Put him down, or I call your mother. 7 words. That's all it took for Dean Martin to stop a mob enforcer cold in the middle of the Desert Inn on October 14th, 1965. 7 words spoken so calmly, so quietly, that people in the room had to lean forward to hear them. 7 words that shouldn't have worked. Not against a 6'4", 260-pound former heavyweight boxer named Anthony Big Tony Accardo. Not against a man who'd broken jaws with single punches and left bodies floating in Lake Mead. Not against someone who worked directly for Sam Giancana and the Chicago outfit. But they did work. And the reason they worked reveals everything you need to know about who Dean Martin really was when the cameras weren't rolling, when the spotlight was off, when being the king of cool could get you killed. This is the story of how a singer faced down a killer with nothing but philosophy and a mother's name. How Joey Bishop's $45,000 gambling debt became a test of brotherhood that would define the Rat Pack forever. How one moment of moral courage in a smoke-filled rehearsal hall became Vegas legend. But to understand what Dean Martin risked that afternoon, you need to understand where it started. 3 hours earlier, when everything seemed perfect, when the Rat Pack was at the absolute peak of their power, when nobody could have predicted that by 2:47 p.m. someone would be choking to death and Dean would have to choose between his safety and his soul. 3 hours earlier, none of this had happened yet. The threat hadn't been made. The choice hadn't been forced. And Dean Martin was just doing what he always did, rehearsing, joking, protecting his brothers without knowing how much it would cost him by the end of the afternoon. At 48 years old, Dean was at his absolute peak. His NBC variety show dominated Thursday nights. His records were selling. The Desert Inn shows were sold out for weeks. He was the king of cool, the man who made everything look effortless. He wore a simple white shirt with rolled sleeves, dark slacks, his hair still perfect, even in rehearsal. The fake exhaustion he performed for audiences was replaced by the real kind. The exhaustion that came from too many shows, too many cities, too many years of making it all look easy. But Joey Bishop was nervous. His leg bounced constantly. He kept glancing at the door, checking his watch, running his hand through his hair. Dean noticed. Dean always noticed when it came to his friends. Not friends, brothers. The Rat Pack wasn't publicity. It was family, the chosen kind, the kind that mattered more because you picked each other. Frank cracked the old joke about Dean's drinking. Dean delivered the perfect deadpan. I feel sorry for people who don't drink. When they wake up in the morning, that's as good as they're going to feel all day. The crew laughed. This was the magic. 5 guys who loved each other, trusted each other, made each other better. The Desert Inn paid them $100,000 a week for this chemistry. Dean walked over to Joey, poured himself apple juice from the bottle everyone assumed was scotch. "You okay, Pally?" Joey forced a smile. "Yeah, Dean. Just tired." Dean knew Joey was lying. After 17 years of friendship, you learned the tells. But some things needed time, needed space. So Dean just squeezed Joey's shoulder and turned back to the stage. Everything was going exactly as it should. This was Dean Martin at his best. This was Dean Martin at his absolute best. The cool, the charm, the brotherhood that made the Rat Pack legendary. But what you're about to witness isn't about the performance. It's about the man who valued loyalty over safety, who protected his brothers even when it meant facing down monsters. If you've ever wondered what real courage looks like when everything is on the line, stay with this story. Drop a like if you're ready to see Dean Martin face the kind of threat that could end careers or lives. Because in 30 seconds, someone was going to walk through that door and test every principle Dean had ever believed in. The door slammed open at 2:47 p.m. Not pushed, slammed, with the kind of force that announced violence before any words were spoken. Anthony Big Tony. Accardo walked in with 3 guys flanking him. Big Tony wasn't subtle. 6'4", 260 pounds, former heavyweight boxer who'd broken a man's jaw with one punch in a Chicago bar and smiled while doing it. He wore an expensive dark suit that couldn't hide the shoulders, the thick neck, the hands that looked like they could crush bowling balls. A scar ran from his left eye to his chin. His eyes were dead, not angry, just empty in the way predators' eyes go flat before they strike. "Joey Bishop," Big Tony's voice came out like gravel being crushed. "We need to talk." Joey stood slowly, the script falling from his hands. His face had gone pale. Dean noticed Joey's hands trembling. That scared Dean more than Big Tony's entrance. Joey was the tough one, the World War II veteran who'd seen actual combat. If Joey was scared, the threat was real. "Tony, I told you I needed more time," Joey said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I've got the money coming. The show pays next week." "You needed time 6 weeks ago," Big Tony interrupted, walking closer. His guys spread out, blocking the exits. Professional, tactical. "You needed time 4 weeks ago. You needed time 2 weeks ago. Mr. Giancana doesn't give unlimited time, Joey. You owe $45,000. That's a number that carries consequences." Frank stood up, his famous temper flashing. "Hey, we're trying to rehearse here. Take this outside." But even Frank's voice had caution in it. You didn't bark at Sam Giancana's enforcer unless you were ready for war. Big Tony didn't even look at Frank. His eyes stayed locked on Joey. "This is between Joey and Mr. Giancana's interests. You want to make it your business, Sinatra? We can arrange that too." The room temperature dropped. Dean set down his glass carefully, his mind working through scenarios. Joey couldn't pay $45,000 in a week. This wasn't going to end with conversation. "Joey makes good," Dean heard himself saying, his voice calm. "He's good for it, Tony." Big Tony finally turned to look at Dean. "This ain't your concern, Martin. Stick to singing." But Dean had already made it his concern the moment he saw Joey's hands shaking, because that's what Dean did. That's who his mother, Angela Crocetti, had raised him to be. "Everything involving my brothers is my concern," Dean said quietly, walking down from the stage. The room went completely silent. Big Tony Accardo wasn't used to resistance. His entire career was built on intimidation. But Dean Martin wasn't cowering. Dean just stood there, casual, hands in his pockets, looking like he was waiting for a taxi. "You're making a mistake, Martin," Big Tony said, his voice getting quieter, more dangerous. "I respect you. But this is business. Chicago business. You don't want to get between Chicago business and money owed." "I respect you too, Tony," Dean said, and he meant it. "But Joey's my friend. So we're going to figure this out a different way." "There is no different way." Then it happened. Big Tony moved so fast the violence seemed to materialize. He grabbed Joey Bishop by the collar with one massive hand and lifted him clean off the ground like Joey weighed nothing. Joey's feet dangled 6 inches off the concrete floor. His face went from pale to red as the collar choked him. His hands grabbed at Big Tony's wrist, trying to break free, but it was like pulling at steel. "You got 48 hours to find $45,000. Big Tony said directly into Joey's terrified face. "Or I start breaking things. Fingers first, then hands. Then we see how funny you are without kneecaps." The room went silent. You could hear breathing. You could hear the air conditioning humming. You could hear distant slot machines from the casino floor 2 levels below. Every person in that rehearsal hall understood they were witnessing a line being crossed. Frank's fists clenched. Sammy's eyes were wide. The crew looked at the floor, and Dean Martin stood there, 10 feet away, watching his friend dangle, choking, terrified, helpless. This was the moment, the choice point. Dean could walk away, let this play out, preserve his safety and career. Big Tony wasn't threatening Dean. This wasn't Dean's debt. Nobody would blame him for staying out of Chicago outfit business. He had a TV show. He had a family. He had too much to lose. But Dean could see Joey's face turning purple. He could hear the choking sounds. He could remember his mother Angela's voice from 30 years ago, from the kitchen in Steubenville, Ohio. "Real strength, Dino, is being kind when you could be cruel. Real power is protecting people weaker than you." Dean took 3 calm steps forward. He didn't run. He didn't shout. He walked with the same casual grace he used to approach a microphone. "Put him down, Tony," Dean said quietly. Big Tony laughed, a sound without humor. "Or what, singer?" Dean stopped 2 feet from Big Tony. He looked up at the bigger man. Dean was only 5 feet 10 inches, giving up 6 inches and 80 pounds. Up close, Big Tony was even more terrifying. Dean could see Joey struggling to breathe, could see his friend's eyes pleading. And then Dean Martin said 7 words that would echo through Las Vegas history. "Put him down, or I call your mother." Now here's the question historians still debate about this moment. Was Dean Martin recklessly brave, or did he calculate that even mob enforcers have mothers they fear disappointing? Was this spontaneous courage or strategic genius? Let us know what you think in the comments. Was this the act of a fearless man or a brilliant psychologist? Either way, Big Tony Accardo had a choice to make, and the entire room waited to see if Dean Martin had just signed his own death warrant. Big Tony's face changed. The dead eyes flickered. His grip on Joey's collar loosened slightly. "What did you say?" "Your mother," Dean repeated, his voice calm, measured. "Lucia Accardo. Lives on Mulberry Street in Chicago. Goes to St. Anthony's Church every Sunday. Plays bingo on Thursday nights. Raised 7 kids by herself after your father died. Am I wrong?" Big Tony's jaw clenched. "How do you—" "I know because I asked," Dean said simply. "When I heard you were coming around Joey, I asked about you, and I learned that Lucia Accardo is a good woman, a decent woman, the kind of woman who taught her son right from wrong, even if he forgot it somewhere along the way." Dean took one more step closer, close enough now that Big Tony could break Dean's neck with one hand. "My mother taught me that real strength is being kind when you could be cruel," Dean continued softly. "Your mother taught you something similar, didn't she? She taught you that power means protecting people, not crushing them. That a strong man doesn't need to hurt people to prove anything." Big Tony's hand was shaking now. Joey hung there, suspended, terrified, but breathing easier. "This isn't about what my mother taught me," Big Tony growled, but his voice had lost certainty. "This is about $45,000 owed to Mr. Giancana." "Then I'll pay it," Dean said flatly. The room gasped. Frank stood. "Dean, no." Dean held up one hand without looking at Frank. "I'll write a check right now. $45,000. Joey's debt is covered. Tell Mr. Giancana that Dean Martin guarantees this debt. Joey will pay me back when he can, on his terms, with no threats, no violence, no broken bones. That's the new deal." "That's not how this works," Big Tony said, but his voice was quieter now. "It is now," Dean said. "Because here's what I know about you, Tony. You're a soldier. You follow orders. But you're also Lucia Accardo's son. And Lucia Accardo didn't raise her boy to hurt comedians over gambling debts." Dean paused, then added quietly, "What would she say if she saw you right now? Would she be proud? Or would she cry?" For a long moment, nothing happened. Time stopped. Joey dangled. Dean stood his ground. Big Tony's face went through a dozen emotions: rage, confusion, shame, something that looked like pain. Then, slowly, Big Tony lowered Joey to the ground, gently, almost carefully. Joey's feet touched concrete, and Big Tony released his collar, stepping back. Joey gasped, coughing, stumbling into Frank's arms. Big Tony looked at Dean for a long moment. His jaw was tight, his fists clenched, his body radiating suppressed violence. But his eyes had changed. The dead look was gone. Something human had surfaced. "This doesn't make us friends," Big Tony said quietly. "And Mr. Giancana still expects his money." "I know," Dean said. "I'll have the check delivered tomorrow morning. Joey's debt is my debt now." Big Tony nodded once. Then he looked at Joey. "You got lucky, Bishop. Dean Martin just saved your life. Don't forget that." Joey nodded, unable to speak, tears in his eyes. Big Tony turned to leave, his 3 guys falling in behind him. But at the door, he stopped and looked back. "My mother does go to St. Anthony's every Sunday," he said quietly. "She'd probably like you." "Then bring her to the show sometime," Dean said with a small smile. "Front row seats. On me." Big Tony almost smiled. Almost. Then he walked out and the door closed with a soft click. The silence that followed was deafening. For 10 seconds, nobody moved. It was like the entire room needed to confirm that what just happened was real. Then Frank Sinatra started laughing. Not his stage laugh, but the real one. "Jesus Christ, Dean," Frank said, pulling Dean into a hug. "Jesus Christ." Sammy Davis Jr. was crying openly, his arm around Joey. Peter Lawford poured scotch with trembling hands. The crew started talking all at once. "Did you see that? He called the guy's mother." Joey walked over to Dean on unsteady legs. His throat was bruised, his collar torn. "Dean, Joey's voice cracked. "I don't know what to say." "Then don't say anything," Dean said gently. "That's what brothers do." "I'll pay you back," Joey said urgently. "Every penny. I swear." "I know you will," Dean interrupted. "When you can. No rush. No threats." That was the deal. Frank handed Dean a glass of scotch. "That was the craziest thing I've ever seen. You know what Giancana could do to you for that?" "Yeah," Dean said quietly. "I know. So why'd you do it?" Sammy asked. Dean looked at Joey, then at Frank, Sammy, and Peter. His brothers. His chosen family. "Because some things are worth the risk," Dean said simply. "And Joey's one of them." The story spread through Las Vegas within hours. By that night, every dealer, showgirl, casino manager, and mobster knew what Dean Martin had done. Some called him brave. Some called him stupid. Some whispered he'd made a powerful enemy. But everyone agreed. Dean Martin had just defined what loyalty meant in a city built on betrayal. The $45,000 check was delivered the next morning. Sam Giancana called Dean that afternoon. "You overpaid by about $44,500, Dean. Joey Bishop ain't worth that much." "Joey's worth more than that to me," Dean replied. Giancana laughed. "You got balls, Martin. Stupid, enormous balls. Big Tony told me what you said about his mother." Giancana paused. "The debt's cleared. Joey's clean. But Dean, don't make a habit of this." "Understood," Dean said. "And thanks. Don't thank me. Thank Lucia Accardo. Tony called her last night. She's been a fan of yours ever since." The phone clicked dead. But stories like this one, the moments when Dean Martin chose courage over comfort, when he risked everything to protect someone weaker, these are the stories that keep his legacy alive beyond the music and the movies. If this moved you, hit that like button and subscribe, because there are dozens more untold Dean Martin stories about loyalty, dignity, and standing up when it costs you everything. And this legacy? It lives on in everyone who chooses brotherhood over safety, who speaks truth to power, who remembers that real strength is being kind when you could be cruel. Years later, in March 1995, 9 months before Dean Martin died, Joey Bishop visited him at his Beverly Hills home. Dean was 77, his health failing, his son dead for 8 years, his spirit worn by grief. But his mind was sharp, his memory perfect. They sat on Dean's patio, drinking coffee, watching the California sunset. Joey had come to say goodbye, though neither said it aloud. They talked about the old days, about Frank and Sammy, about Vegas in its golden age. "I paid you back every penny," Joey said quietly. "Took me 4 years, but I paid you back." "I know you did," Dean said. "I never doubted you would." "But I never thanked you," Joey continued. "Not really. You saved my life that day, Dean. Big Tony would have killed me." Dean was quiet, watching the sun sink. "You want to know the truth, Joey? I was terrified, the whole time. My hands were shaking so bad after Tony left that I couldn't hold a glass for an hour." Joey looked surprised. "You? You looked so calm." "That's the thing nobody understands," Dean said softly. "Courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about doing the right thing, even when you're scared out of your mind. My mother taught me that. And your friendship was worth being scared for." Joey wiped his eyes. "Your mother would have been proud of you." Dean smiled sadly. "I hope so. I've spent my whole life trying to make her proud." They sat in comfortable silence, two old friends who'd shared stages and the kind of brotherhood that only comes from facing death together. "You know what Big Tony told me?" Joey said. "Years later, 1975 maybe, I ran into him at the dunes. He was retired. Out of the life. He said that moment changed him. Said he went home that night and called his mother. Really talked to her for the first time in years. Said you reminded him who he was supposed to be. Dean nodded slowly. We all forget sometimes who we're supposed to be. What matters? My mother used to say that life gives you moments where you choose the man you become. That day with Big Tony? That was one of those moments for both of us. As the sun disappeared and the California sky turned dark, Joey stood to leave. He hugged Dean tightly, knowing it might be the last time. I love you, Pally, Joey said. I love you too, Dean replied. Always have. Always will. 9 months later, when Dean Martin died on Christmas Day 1995, Joey Bishop was one of the pallbearers. At the funeral, he told the story of October 14th, 1965. The story had been told 1,000 times, had become legend, but Joey told it simply, truthfully, the way it actually happened. And in the front row sat an 89-year-old woman named Lucia Accardo. Her son Anthony had died in 1992, but before he passed, he'd told her about Dean Martin, about the day a singer reminded him who his mother had raised him to be. She'd never met Dean, but she'd watched his shows, bought his records, and prayed for him at St. Anthony's Church every Sunday. At the end of the funeral, Lucia Accardo stopped by Dean's casket. She laid a single red rose on top and whispered something in Italian that only she and God could hear. But people close enough said it sounded like a prayer of gratitude for the man who'd saved her son's soul by invoking her name. Dean Martin carried his mother's teachings for his entire life. The principle was simple but profound. Real strength is being kind when you could be cruel. Real power is protecting people weaker than you. Real courage is standing up when standing up could cost you everything. That's not just Dean Martin's legacy. That's a challenge for all of us.